Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take a look at how to install nmap on our CentOS virtual machine. This video assumes a number of things, that you've installed a couple of virtual machines, in this case, using our Oracle VirtualBox. It is not necessary that you are running CentOS as a virtual machine, but for these demonstrations, we are going to be using a virtual network that is going to be provided for us by Oracle VirtualBox, and we are going to be attempting to do a port scan on various machines on that virtual network. And so to begin with, we want to go ahead and log into one of our virtual machines. And what we're going to do is we're going to be using the Red Hat Package Manager to download and install nmap on our virtual machine. Now, before we get started, a quick reminder that any types of activities like this, for instance, port scanning on a remote machine, needs to be done on a virtual network or on a network that you have complete control over. All right, so to begin with, we want to go ahead and launch our terminal. And at the beginning, we can just simply check to see if nmap is already installed. And so if I just type in nmap and hit enter, it's going to say that the command is not found. Now, it would potentially download and install nmap. However, we don't want to go this route. Instead, we want to do this ourselves so that we have a little bit of familiarity and a little bit of control over this. So to begin with, we want to take a look at the Red Hat Package Manager. And again, much like many other utilities in Linux, you can just simply pass the dash help to see all of the options. We're going to be interested in using a couple of different options associated with the Red Hat Package Manager. Again, the Red Hat Package Manager is sort of one of the original package managers, and it is leveraged both by Yum and by DNF. And we've seen those package managers in other videos. So to begin with, what we want to do is we want to remember that we need to do this with sudo. So we're going to do a sudo RPM. The selection of switches that we'll be using is going to be -v for verbose, H to show the hash, in other words, show progress, and then capital U then for upgrade. I'm going to go ahead and provide this particular URL in the comments section of the video, but one of the advantages of using Red Hat Package Managers, it will actually let you download directly from a remote URL as opposed to just using a repository. And in this case, I'm going to download it and install it directly from https://nmap.org. In other words, we're going to go straight to the site that hosts nmap. We're going to be looking at their dist folder on their website, and we're going to be looking for nmap-7.92-1, and we will be looking at the x86 64-bit RPM. And again, I'll provide you with this link. You can also go to their website to be able to get the most recent version of nmap. Provide the password. If I don't have the URL typed wrong, what should happen is it should start downloading and installing this particular package. So we're retrieving, we're verifying, and then ultimately installing. So at this point, then we should have successfully downloaded and installed nmap. And just to see that we have, we can simply type nmap-version. And sure enough, then you will see buried in here is nmap version 7.92, as well as the source from where we got it from. Now, before we go any further, I would like for us to take a quick look to understand how our CentOS installation has actually been modified. So I want to open up another tab in my terminal, and what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to do an ls-l so we get our bearings as to where we are on the operating system. And then I'm going to do a cd to the root, which then gets us all the way back to the root of our installation, the root of our drive. And then what we want to do is we want to cd into the USR folder. And again, we'll do it ls-l, so we get list view, and you'll see that there is a bin folder and a bunch of other folders. The bin folder is where the binaries or the links to the binaries reside, and we could cd into that. And again, if we do an ls-l, we'll actually get a lot of options here that we can simply refine down to maybe looking for n star, which means we're only going to be looking for the options that start with n. And if you look very carefully, you will see that there is now an nmap. Now, don't worry too much about the date here. That is just the date associated with the essentially with this binary link. I want a binary or the binary link. What I'd like to do is I'd actually like to take a look at where nmap itself is actually installed. And so I'm going to open up one more tab here in terminal. And again, I'm going to CD back to the root. This time, though, I'm going to CD into usr/share. And then if I do an ls-l here, and if we are very careful with looking through this, you'll see that there is, again, an nmap here. And so we can CD into nmap and again do an ls-l, and you'll see all of the various files associated with our nmap installation, as well as a scripts folder. And there you'll notice that that scripts folder actually has a more recent date associated with it, and particularly it actually has the date associated with me creating this particular video. Well, now at this point we have our nmap installed. Let's actually try to run it. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run nmap against myself, and I'm simply going to use 127.0.0.1. Where did I get that from? Well, that's my local loopback adapter address. And you can see here that I have those ports responding. So in other words, port 22 for SSH, port 111 for the RPC bind, and then port 631 for IPP. And that's just simply the default ports as my CentOS installation set them up. On additional machines, we'll be adding, for instance, a web server, a FTP server, and so on. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd also like to look at the differences between what I see with my local host and what I see with other addresses. And specifically what I'd like to do is I would like to run then nmap against this statically declared IP address. And so essentially I'm going to rerun nmap, this time with my 192.168.2.99. And you'll see then that I only have 2 ports responding on that particular IP address. So the idea is that on the local loopback adapter IP address, I may, for instance, for testing purposes in the future, only have certain services that respond on the loopback adapter and not respond, in this case, to queries on the 192.168.2.99 interface. Now, I'd like to take this I'd like to take this process then one step further, and I would actually like to look then at what happens when you attempt to query a remote machine. And specifically what I'd like to do now is I would like to bring a second virtual machine into the mix here. So hopefully you've installed a couple of them, at least 2, maybe more virtual machines. And you'll see specifically here that I have a second virtual machine that has a IP address of 2.100. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to scan that IP address to see if there are any ports available on it. And so what we'll do is we'll start off by doing the nmap 192.168.2.100. And arguably one of the things that you should do even before that is you should verify that you can in fact ping the IP address. So first, we'll ping 192.168.2.100, and it seems like it is responding. It is actually, as it turns out, on the same virtual network. So if you can't ping it, you probably can't scan it, but that doesn't work the other way around. As a matter of fact, when you run nmap against this particular machine, you'll see that it thinks the host is down. In other words, basically something is preventing nmap from running. It can communicate, meaning that we can ping from one virtual machine to another virtual machine. However, though, nmap is unable to see what services are on that remote host. Now, if you followed along with the earlier video, you can probably guess what's wrong, and that is that we still have our firewall up. And so to check that, we can simply run sudo and then the systemctl command. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the status of our firewall daemon. in other words, firewall D, and you'll see that once I enter in my password for gmyers for sudo, that I do in fact have an actively running firewall. Well, that's good under normal circumstances, and as a matter of fact, we will actually continue to do this in the future. But what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to stop the firewall to see if it changes the behavior of nmap. And so we'll go ahead and stop our firewall daemon. We'll check the status again, and you'll see that it is inactive or dead. And then what we'll do is we'll come over here to our second virtual machine. And from the second virtual machine, we'll attempt to run nmap. And you will see that now my port 22 on my second virtual machine, or rather, in this particular case, what I am calling my server, is now available because the firewall is down. Now, obviously, you would not want to drop your firewall in a production machine. Instead, what you would want to do is you'd want to modify your firewall so that only certain services can be exposed. For instance, a web service or an FTP service. Now, we're going to be covering that in later videos. However, though, for your purposes, what you want to do is you want to think of this as a multi-step process. The first thing that you do is you ping the remote machine just to see if it's available. You then follow that up by running nmap to see what services are available on the remote machine. And then as we start testing, for instance, a web server, we will see the effects of dropping the firewall on the web server as opposed to poking holes in the firewall or setting up rules in the firewall. So as always with any of these videos, hopefully you found it useful. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.